Tractate Makos, page 7a, 5:25 p.m., 1725, 5:25 p.m. Israel Standard Time. Top of the page. Makot, 7. With the words Ila Vitovia, Kriva Diaravayo. Apropos, disqualified witnesses, the Gemara relates two people called Elah and Tovia. Kriva Diaravayo, who signed as witnesses on a promissory note, were relatives of the guarantor of the loan. Amar le Rav Huna bered Rav Yehoshua le Rav Papa I lesle elove lav basar arva azil malve. Rav Papa thought to say that since vis-a-vis the borrower and lender these witnesses are distant and not related, their testimony on the document is valid. Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, said to Rav Papa, if the borrower does not have the means to repay the loan, doesn't the lender pursue the guarantor to claim his debt? Therefore, the guarantor is party to the loan, and his relatives are not eligible to serve as witnesses on the promissory note. That concludes the Talmud on this Mishnah. Now, new Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Mi shenigmar dino ubarach uba lifnei oso bezdin ein sosrin es dino. Kol makom shiamdu shnayim vayomer mi'idim anu bish ploni shenigmar dino bebeit din shel ploni uploni einav harei zeh yareg. The Mishnah says, the Mishnah continues to discuss the matter of testimony in the case of one who is liable to be executed concerning one whose verdict was delivered, and he was sentenced to death, and he fled, and then he came before the same court that sentenced him. They do not overturn his verdict and retry him. Rather, the court administers the previous verdict. I mean, here's where I would think the Gemara would say Pshita. But anyway, okay. Consequently, sometimes the Gemara says like Pshita, isn't that obvious? So I would think that's very obvious. But anyway, rather the court administers the previous verdict. Consequently, in any place where two witnesses will stand and say, we testify with regard to a man called so-and-so, that his verdict was delivered and he was sentenced to death in the court of so-and-so, and so-and-so and so-and-so are his witnesses, that person shall be executed on the basis of that testimony. Sanhedrin noheges ba'aretz v'chutz ha'aretz. Sanhedrin horeges echad v'shavua nikres chovlanis. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah omer echad l'shivim shana. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva omrim ilu haynu Sanhedrin nerag adam me'olam. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer af hein marbin shochei damim b'Yisrael. The Mishnah continues. The mitzvah to establish a Sanhedrin with the authority to administer capital punishments is in effect both in Eretz Yisrael and outside Eretz Yisrael. A Sanhedrin that executes a transgressor once in 7 years is characterized as a destructive tribunal. Since the Sanhedrin would subject the testimony to exacting scrutiny, it was extremely rare for a defendant to be executed. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, this categorization applies to a Sanhedrin that executes a transgressor once in 70 years. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva say, if we had been members of the Sanhedrin, we would have conducted trials in a manner whereby no person would have ever been executed. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, in adopting that approach, they too would increase the number of murders among the Jewish people. the death penalty will lose its deterrent value, as all potential murderers would know that no one is ever executed. Oh, that's logical. Yeah, makes sense. That's the point. Gemara. Gemara says, Lifnei oto bed din hu de'ein soisrin ha lifnei beis din acher soisrin ha tani seifa kol makam shiyamnu shnav yamru mi'idin lo es ish ploini shring badina beis din ploini edav haraizen neherag. Gemara infers, it is in the case of one who comes before the same court that they do not overturn the verdict, but if one comes before a different court, they overturn the verdict and retry the case. The Gemara asks, isn't it taught in the latter clause of the Mishnah, any place where two witnesses will stand and say, we testify with regard to a man called so-and-so, that his verdict was delivered, and he was sentenced to death in the court of so-and-so, and so-and-so and so-and-so were his witnesses, that person shall be executed on the basis of that testimony. This indicates that the verdict is not overturned and the defendant is not retried even before another court. Amar Abaye lo kashi kam ben Israel kam bechutz lo'ochet. Abaye said this apparent contradiction is not typical, as here in the first clause of the Mishnah, from which it is inferred that the second court overturns the initial verdict, it is referring to a case where the initial verdict was outside of Eretz Israel and the defender came before a court in Eretz Israel. There, in the latter clause, which indicates that the second court sustains the initial verdict and does not retry the defendant, it is referring to a case where the initial verdict was in Eretz Israel and the case subsequently came before a court outside Eretz Israel. Okay? Next. Titania Rabbi Yehuda ben Dostai Omer Yishum Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach Barach me'eretz lechutz la'aretz ein sosren es dino lechutz la'aretz sosren es dino mipnei zchuza shel Eretz Yisrael. This is as the son of Brian that Rabbi Yehuda ben Dostai says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Shetach. Ben Shatach. If a convicted defendant fled from Eretz Yisrael to outside of Eretz Yisrael, one does not overturn those verdicts. Rather, they implement the initial verdict. But if one fled from outside Eretz Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael, one overturns his verdict, and the defendant is retried. Perhaps, due to the merit of Eretz Yisrael, the court will discover a reason to exonerate him. Sanhedrin noeges chule mina hani mili titanu abonon v'hayu eile lachem lechugas mishpat le'oiseichem למדנו לסנהדרין שנוהגת בארץ וכוזרת. The Mishnah teaches the mitzvah to establish a Sanhedrin with the authority to administer capital punishments is in effect both in Eretz Israel and outside of Eretz Israel. The Gemara clarifies, from where are these matters derived? It is, as the sages taught, it is written with regard to the sentencing of murderers, and these shall be for you for a statute of justice for your generations in all your dwelling places. Numbers 35:29. From which we learn that the mitzvah to establish a Sanhedrin is in effect in both Eretz Israel and outside. We're saying that we learn the mitzvah to establish a Sanhedrin is in effect both in Eretz Israel and outside of Eretz Israel. Im Kain, Ma tam loima bisharecho atam oishi batidinim bechol pelech ופלך כל עברי בחוץ לארץ atam oishi bechol pelech atam oishi bechol עברי. If so, what is the meaning when the verse states, judges and officers you shall appoint in all your gates? Deuteronomy 16:18, which indicates that the mitzvah is to establish a Sanhedrin, is in effect where the gates are yours, i.e., only in Eretz Yisrael. The explanation is as follows: in your gates in Eretz Yisrael, you establish courts in each and every district and in each and every city, and outside Eretz Yisrael, you establish courts in each and every district, but you do not establish courts in each and every city. The requirement to establish courts in every city is only in Eretz Yisrael. Sanhedrin ha'oeges v'chulei iboilehu achas hashimu shalom nekes chablonis oidilma orach arahi teku. I'd be curious to find out what number teku this is. Maybe 187? The Mishnah teaches a Sanhedrin that executes once in 7 years is characterized as a destructive tribunal. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says this categorization applies to a Sanhedrin that executes once in 7 years. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah saying that a Sanhedrin that executes once in 70 rather than 7 years is characterized as a destructive tribunal? Or perhaps he is saying that a standard conduct is for a Sanhedrin to execute once in 7 years, and only if it executes more than that, than a person. I mean, from the context, it would seem that if it's once in 7 years, it was standard practice. But if he's more than that, then it's destructive. The Gemara concludes, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. Okay? Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Kiva Omrim, Ilu Ainu, Hechi, Havo, Avdi, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar, De Amri Taravayu. Re'isem Treifa Harag Shelem. Harag. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva say, if we had been members of the Sanhedrin, we would have conducted trials in a manner where no person would have ever been executed. The Gemara asks, how would they have acted to spare the accused from execution if witnesses testified that he has intentionally committed murder? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar both say that they would have asked the witnesses, did you see whether the accused killed the treifa? I mean, the person with the condition that would lead to his death within 12 months, or if he killed someone who was intact. The halachic status of a treifa is like that of one who is dead. In that sense, that one who kills him is not executed, since the witnesses can certain, with regard to the existence of physical condition, they would invalidate any testimony to a murder. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi said, "Imtim Shaloimar Shalim Have Dilma Makam Saif Nekev Have." Ravashi said, even if you say that they examined him post-mortem and he was intact, the testimony could be challenged, as perhaps in the place that the sword pierced the victim's body, there was a perforation in one of the organs that renders the person a treifa, but which was rendered undetectable by the wound caused by the sword. But do you kill a person that way? I thought you chop off his head. Anyway, Boyle as the erva hechi havi Rabbi Ravat Amit Harvayu Reisim Kimechachol Bishoferes. Rabbanan ha'echidayenu Kishmol D'mer Shmuel ben Afim Mishiero ken Afim. The Gemara asks, with regard to one who engages in intercourse with a forbidden relative, how would they have acted to spare the accused from execution? Rabbi and Rabba both say that they would have asked the witnesses, did you see the intercourse like a brush entering into a tube? Since witnesses rarely witness the act so closely, one could claim that the testimony is incomplete. The Gemara asks, and concerning the rabbis who disagree with the Torah from Rabbi Akiva, how would they have adjudicated that case? The Gemara answers, they hold in accordance with the statement of Shmuel, as Shmuel says, in cases involving adulterers, one can testify and convict them from when they will appear as adulterers, without any need for him to witness the act in graphic detail. We will return to you, our witnesses. And that's the end of that. That was the first parak of Makos. Now we're starting the second parak with the new Mishnah. Elu hein hagoylim. Zogt Heilige Mishnah. Elu hein hagoylim ha'erin nefesh mishkago. Hoye magel v'magelo v'nafal alav ha'aktoi. Hoye mishash b'yochavis v'naflo olav ha'aktoi. Hoye yoyer v'sulam v'nafal alav v'ha'aktoi. Hare elu goylim. אבל אם היה מושך במעגלה ונפלה עליו והרגתו, היה דולה בחבית ונפסק בחבל ונפלה עליו והרגתו. We'll just finish the Mishnah. היה עולה בסולם ונפל עליו והרגו, הרי זה אינו גולה. זה הכלל. כל שבדרך ילידתו גולה, so the Mishnah says these are the people who are exiled. Anyone who kills a person unintentionally, whether one is liable to be exiled depends on the particular circumstances of the case. If one was rolling a roller to smooth the covering of mortar and he applied to seal his roof and the roller fell upon the person and killed him, or if one was lowering a barrel from a roof and it fell on a person and killed him, or if he was descending a ladder, he fell on a person and killed him. In all these cases, he is exiled. But if one was pulling a roller toward him and it fell from his hands upon a person and killed him, or if one was lifting a barrel and the rope was severed and fell upon a person and killed him, or if one was climbing a ladder and it fell upon a person and killed him, that unintentional murder is not exiled. This is the principle. Any murderer who kills unintentionally through the downward motion is exiled, and one who kills not through his downward motion is not exiled. Okay, that's the Mishnah, and we've completed 7a.